Well, of course, your boy, me, ends the free agency stream, goes out to dinner, sits down at the restaurant, pulls out my phone, and gets a notification that the Seahawks have made their big splash of the day. Not the only big splash that they made. Well, we'll call it a splash. They made two splashes today, and this was the big one. And of course, I don't see it until I'm already sitting down at a restaurant for dinner. So I'm late to the party here. This happened almost, I want to say, an hour and a half ago. We got word about this. But nevertheless, here we are. Big Cat, Leonard Williams, is back in Seattle. So priority number one for this free agency period has been taken care of. Now, the money, that's a little bit hairy. It is. I'm not going to lie, this is more than I thought it would be, and more than I wanted it to be. But at the end of the day, when you look at what happened with Chris Jones, when you look at what happened with Christian Wilkins, it makes sense. It makes sense that something like this would happen. So I can't really argue with that side of it. Prices are going up. The price of quality football players in this league is going up. And either you can accept that reality, or you can live in denial of it and never get any good players because you're not going to be able to meet their asking price. So I'm not going to sweat that too much. Leonard Williams re-signs with the Seahawks, 3 years, $64.5 million. So that is more than what Dre'Mont Jones got last year, which, I mean, that makes sense, right? He's clearly a better player than Dre'Mont Jones. He is. And the cap has gone up since then. So I get it. I do. I understand. I was hoping there might be a little bit of a concession because he is older. He is about to turn 30. But then you look at what happened with Chris Jones. You look at what happened with Christian Wilkins. It started to add up to where that wasn't going to pass scrutiny. So we did what we had to do. 3 years, $64.5 million. I did read somewhere that that is the maximum value of this contract. So maybe there are some incentives that could prevent it from getting as high as $64.5 million. I think that about 2/3 of the contract is guaranteed. So what is probably going to happen is that the first 2 years are going to be really firm, and then that third year will have an easy out. But we need to see exactly how the contract is laid out. We probably will either later tonight or tomorrow. Same for Noah Fant, by the way. And we need to see the precise contract before we judge. And that's something that I really want to stress right now. I see people trying to figure out exactly how much cap space we have right now. There's no way to know, guys. We need to see how these contracts are structured. We need to see if they used void years, which I doubt they did, but maybe they did. Need to see how much money they backloaded. In the case of Noah Fant, I've already speculated they may have backloaded it heavily and have that second year almost like a team option. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to allow the information to come out before I judge anything, because I know that some Seahawks fans have looked at these price tags and definitely had sticker shock. Somewhat on Fant. I don't think so much for Fant. I think that most people understand that Noah Fant, a talented tight end, a move tight end like Noah Fant, is going to cost money. Leonard Williams, I said before the offseason started, my goal was like 3 years, $54 million, and he got significantly more than that. He had leverage, he used it well, and the market moved. In fairness, right? Like, the amount of money players get is based off the size of the salary cap. The cap went up, so players asked for more. Good players in particular asked for more. As this tweet from Field Goals outlines, Williams wouldn't even be a top 5 highest paid interior defensive lineman based on APY. And you know what? He shouldn't, right? Because he's not as good as Chris Jones. He's not as good as Christian Wilkins. He's not as good as the best of the best. But I guess this is in line with expectations now, because he is very good, and we saw that last year. I think some people have forgotten how good he looked because the defense was so bad. But that didn't change the fact that Leonard Williams was doing his job pretty much every week. The guy was bringing it every game he played. And there were some games where he was the only guy you could really say that about. Everybody else was just not getting it done. Leonard Williams, pretty much every week got it done. So that's the price. Now, the position is pretty much zipped up. You've got Draymond Jones and Leonard Williams starting. You've got Mike Morris coming off the bench. We are going to need another backup behind Big Cat and Draymond. But in terms of us going out and spending a boatload on a premier defensive lineman or spending our first-round pick on a Byron Murphy or Jerzon Newton, I think it's pretty much dead. I think that we're not doing that at this point. Can't make it make sense. We've already invested so much money into the position. Draymond and Leonard are making the big bucks now, so you got to ride with them and hope that the ride ends in a good place. All right, so good to see this happened. Believe me, I understand that people are going to have their sticker shock at this price because it is, I would say, 15 to 20% more than I wanted or expected before this process started. But then some things started to go down, and after the Wilkins contract and after some of the other contracts we saw, it started to look like it was leaning towards it was leaning in Big Cat's favor, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about a difference of a few $1 million that the Seahawks can easily, if they really want to, they can easily find ways around it, right? They can use void years. I know they typically don't, but if they're not willing to take big cap hits now, they can reduce it by spreading out little cap hits down the line. Down the line when the cap is way, way, way up, and those little void years don't even mean anything. They can do stuff like that. So let them figure it out. They've done it before. They don't do it often, but they may do it again. And let's see how these contracts are structured. Probably we're done for the day. Probably that's the end for day one. We will be back tomorrow, and we're going to see what the team decides to do now that they've locked up a tight end. We literally needed a tight end, and now that they've locked up the guy that really would have embarrassed them, losing Leonard Williams after a mid-season trade for a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick, that would have been embarrassing. That would have been a disaster. And it would have been tough to justify that. So now we just hope that Big Cat justifies himself with his play. He's been making big money for a few years now, and he's continued to play well. So I don't think he's a guy who gets paid and decides he doesn't care anymore. But the age is a concern. So 2 more good years, Leonard. Give me 2 more big years, and then probably, and I'll say more when we get contract details, probably a way out at that point. All right, so I'll probably make another video later tonight. I will be live on Twitch later tonight as well, and hope to see you guys there. But yeah, Leonard Williams is back in Seattle. 3 years, $64.5 million. Sound off in the comments. I know that there are going to be some people who say it's too much. I think there are going to be some people who are willing to live with that, and there are going to be some people who maybe are a little more in the middle. All right, peace out, go Hawks.